just to give some really brief background for listeners, Sal was Sal is involved in human rights court case. I'll get Sal to fully explain all that. And look, Kev, you have a really unique perspective, and I'm really not big on categorizing people by stuff like that. But Kev's also an FTM trans person, and a mate of mine who I'm trying to get up here to get to the pub. The reason I facilitated this conversation is because I just want to talk it through, and I want to get your unique perspectives. But to give the contextual background, Sal, I'll just get you to outline, briefly who you are, the Giggle app, and what happened.
Okay, so just the quickest way I can explain it is that, I could not have walked into this issue more blindly. I created an app exclusively for women. And when I say women, that actually includes females. I'm saying women because that's the older, that's the word for old, mature, older, like above the age of, maturity. But it is a female-only social networking app that includes trans men, because we're talking female here. So I don't know how to explain it any better than that. It was just for finding roommates and social networking in various different ways, lesbian dating, emotional support, all that sort of stuff. And then we were cancelled straight out of the gate by trans activists. That's how I got brought into all of this. I had no idea about any of it. I'd never heard the word TERF before. And then, so they, basically attempted to destroy the company, and we made the decision to just, tread water, hold on, wait it out, fight back, all those sorts of things. And in January 2022, I got a human rights complaint against me for gender identity discrimination from a man who claims to be a woman. And that has escalated, and it's now a federal court case with the Australian Human Rights Commission intervening as amicus curiae on the side of the applicant, not me. Because AHRC intervened as amicus curiae, this case will go to the High Court, because if we lose in the federal court, we're going to take it to the High Court. And I would assume that if the other side loses in federal court, because the AHRC is there, that they would probably take it to the High Court. So the chances of this ending up in the High Court is very high. We have a great legal team. I've read the case at this point. I know exactly what the case is. I can't talk about it, but I know what it is. And yeah, what this case quite honestly comes down to reality versus ideology. That's it.
But we're just interested in your perspective on this too.
I kind of similarly walked into this by accident myself. Like, I transitioned in 2001, kind of got everything, hung around the community for a few years, probably up to about 2005, left the country for a year, came back, went off and did, like cookery type things because I'm a chef. And then because I'm curious, I was watching Joe Rogan, and Abigail Shrier was doing press. I think it was just after her book was released. She was doing press for her book, talking about rapid onset gender dysphoric girls, the social contagion. And from the way, like, if you have seen Abigail Shrier speak at all, she just is so authentic. And what she was saying made absolute sense to me, and I could see how that could be that. Like, what she said, what she was saying was also highly possible. Like, it just, everything clicked into place. It made sense. What she was saying was pretty much true. You could tell from the way she presents herself, she wasn't going to go out of her way to lie about these sorts of things. Like, there's nothing in it for her to do that. And I kind of peaked, and I was like, that's some serious shit. And then the next episode that I watched after that was Deborah So, who is a sexologist, talking about the same issue. After that, I jumped on Twitter to find out what the fuck had changed. And spent the next couple of months being told that I needed to educate myself on trans issues and that I was, basically a TERF and a Nazi and a bigot, and I was anti-trans and blah, 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 blah.
Do you feel like you've educated yourself enough
Yeah,
now?
pretty much. But it's just it's weird because like 2003-ish, I kind of read Patrick Califia's Sex Change book, which was meant to be a history of this history. And there were bits of queer theory kind of inserted into that book, and it was so nonsense. Like, it was just like, this is ridiculous. No one's ever going to take this seriously. Like, you skip forward, like, you don't even bother reading it. You just skip forward a few pages, close the book, put it aside, and then never think of it again, because you're like, that's just batshit. No one's ever going to take that seriously. And then on Twitter, as I was coming onto Twitter, I realized, oh, everybody's taking it seriously.
Not only Twitter, I will tell you right now, the Australian Human Rights Commission takes it seriously.
Yeah.
And really briefly explain those the podcasts that you watch too with those people. So really briefly, who they are, what they said.
Oh God, where to even start? It is basically held together with duct tape and string. Basically, there are. God, where to even start? It's basically postmodern Marxist nonsense. Sal's going to disagree with me in that I think that it's heavily influenced by feminism, because it kind of came out of that realm.
We should talk about that later, because
there's kind of
this was a great chat
stuff in Germany in the turn of the century, where transsexual people started coming to this sexological clinic, presenting with this problem, is where I kind of start to be aware of it. There are cross-dressers. There are cross-dressers that were in the aristocracy that populate, like, that kind of pepper throughout history. But the first I'm kind of aware of it is, like, homosexuality is a term invented just before the turn of the I always get the centuries mixed up, but the 1900s.
Before the turn of the 20 to like go into the 20th century. Yeah. And because there's from my understanding, because I've watched that Abigail Schreier Joe Rogan thing, because before I started speaking out, I listened to everything and read everything I could. And that podcast with her on Joe Rogan was one of the ones I played on repeat. Because she's got it. Minded. She's so careful.
She's too fair-minded. It's so obvious. Like that.
At this point, I'm like,
one trans person in a school is a unicorn.
Yeah.
2 is an impossibility. I'm sorry, but it just is impossible.
No,
so if you have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 in the class, there's nothing else it can be. It's social contagion,
without a doubt. And she says there's like 100-year diagnostic history on gender dysphoria, and it was males.
Yeah.
And basically, and I mean, the data was in. A lot grew out of it post puberty. There was there'd be sort of, I can't remember the percentage, but like, let's even say like 80%, which I think is
like between 60 and 90 something percent.
Yeah, it's like
there are 11 studies. I kind of am concerned because in this instance, like, what they're saying it has no basis in reality. Like, what they're trying to push through with this gender stuff, a lot of trans people, like a lot of older trans people, so people that transitioned pre 2010, which is probably the bulk of people, have no idea what to do with this gender stuff. Like, this gendered identity stuff is a very much an academic idea, where they kind of looked at what they thought trans was, and then tried to come up with some coherent theory, and this is one of the things they came up with. But there's no evidence to back it up at all. So this is kind of scary in 2 ways, in that it's not based in reality at all, and it's totalitarian.
Completely and utterly agree with you. And I think, like, Matt, you hit the nail on the head. Like, when you've got 2 different tribes, like, warring over something, but one might be telling the truth more, but it is ultimately subjective. You're in a situation where there isn't objective truth.
There's
We're not in
objective
that
truth here.
situation. There is utter objective truth here. I mean, no human being changes sex. Like, when I am dead and buried, you could dig up my bones.
In 150 years, you won't be able to tell your skeleton from my skeleton. Like,
exactly.
like that is the reality of the
Even
situation.
100,000 years, we won't be able to. Like, I mean, like, we are talking like forever. That's just the reality. Like, and you know, in terms of these gender laws that have come in, we weren't consulted about any of them, not in any mainstream way.
There was
You
no
know,
discussion. No discussion.
No,
There was no discussion
example,
in the trans community either. Like,
no, like I am obviously for gay marriage, and I remember at the time when gay marriage, like, you know, it was going to the plebiscite, and I was like, why does it even have to go to a plebiscite at this point? And it's like, because that is actually democracy. Like, I still think like
I was the same. I was like, why is I kind of am changing my position on gay marriage a bit. But I kind of was in a similar position in that, you know, like I was a young lesbian, deeply monogamous, totally like interested in long-term, forever, happily ever after type stuff. So I was always going to, you know, do the gay marriage thing. I was a little bit ambivalent about the actual legal recognition at the time, and I wasn't quite sure why we couldn't just have, you know, like civil unions or something like that. I didn't have a dog in that.
I'll tell you why I'm for gay marriage. And even I've heard the arguments of, like, you know, was it the beginning of changing definitions? First of all, no, is because gay marriage came in 2016 and gender identity came in 2013. So no, it was not the beginning. It was gender identity that did this, not gay marriage. But also, marriage is a man-made concept. It does evolve. We don't get sold as property anymore. The concept of marriage has changed over time. We can get divorced now. Even just the interaction of marriage is different. It's constantly evolving. What is a male and what is a female has not evolved. It just is. We are the product of evolution, in fact. Like, this is it. Like, we're here in those terms. And so while you might have some social evolution on things, like there are some people who don't want to be or present as their sex, okay, that's fine. Then there needs to be protections specifically for those people. But those protections cannot be at the expense of other people. Like, if this whole discussion had been that we want to have protections for trans women and trans men, okay.
Yeah.
Fine. But you can't even suggest that now without being accused of othering. And you're like, I'm not othering. I'm saying that I'm not othering in any way, like how saying that women need bathrooms separate from men are othering. You know, it's just, no, I'm saying that there's specific needs here. And let's recognize those specific needs. But instead of doing that in law, they just tried to punch it in and not go to any referendums, any plebiscites or anything like that. There's no mandates for these laws. That's the craziest thing.
Yeah.
Most people don't know that they've happened.
Yeah.
And my ultimate thing is you can have any belief system you want on them, and you might agree with them, you might not agree with them, whatever it is. But you shouldn't be forced to believe in them.
Yeah.
At this point, not believing, they're trying to make it that not believing in queer theory is illegal in Australia, and I've got a huge problem with that.
Yeah, you're not lying.
I mean, I'm an atheist, but even if I was religious, I mean, I'd have a problem if I was being forced to believe in religion. But if I was Christian, I wouldn't want to be forced to believe Islam. If I was Islamic, I wouldn't want to be forced to believe Christianity or anything like that. You know what I mean? So it's like every part of this they've just tried to jam it in without regards to anything else and anyone else's human rights. And it's not sustainable. It's going to come back and bite them in the ass. So the rubber's going to hit the road, and I think it's pretty soon, because
your court case, there's half a dozen. Well, there's a few detransition cases coming up. Like, there are parents that are opting out of, you know, queer theory lessons in primary schools and high schools, and this is about to get quite serious. I kind of think, going back to the gay marriage thing, I think the thing that maybe we were perhaps a bit too young to comprehend at the time, and that's why we got frustrated, is that it was kind of the first time that we, as a country, had a public debate about which way is this going to go. Like, and because it's such a large debate, there's a lot of repetition. But I found out recently, in 1900, they started discussing the constitution that would be for Australia, that would be Australian. They actually sent copies of what was going to be the constitution out to every Australian household. Every Australian citizen got to read it, think about it, debate it before they then voted on it. I kind of think, in looking back at the time, I kind of think the gay marriage debate was tedious for those of us who had made up our minds what we thought, but it was kind of a very necessary piece of democracy at work, and that is kind of slow and clunky, and but I kind of think, looking back on it now, I'm kind of like, oh, that's the reason that it took so long. That's why it played out that way, is because it kind of has to be that way to be a public debate. Similarly to the debate that you've been part of it for longer than I have. I've been part of it for a couple of years on Twitter at this stage, and it's starting to spill off out of Twitter into the public realm as the media becomes aware of it. I think that it's like, this is the process of how we have these debates.
It is, but what you get from the trans activist community is that, you shouldn't be debating our lives. And I can understand that narrative to a point, in the sense that I sort of do feel that about gay marriage, because I would have argued that denying gay marriage was sex discrimination, because who cares what sex you are? It's just you're discriminating on the basis of sex there, for example. And that's why.
But if you're Matt, or someone like Matt who is deeply Christian, he would probably be like, well, I don't really agree with it, but I don't really care one way or the other. I'm putting words in your mouth, just go with it. But he's like, this is going to discriminate. Like, what we did was basically, we never answered the question of how far can the church discriminate. Like, they don't believe in gay marriage, so their rights were taken over in that instance, because everybody was like, nah, we don't care.
Well, I would say that I actually think what is fair is that one of the ways that it's different is that so with gay marriage is not analogous to trans issues, in a sense that gay marriage was not saying that straight people have to go and get gay married.
Yeah.
But trans rights are saying that people who are not trans have to actually engage with this stuff in a very serious
day-to-day way.
But I do respect the religious elements of it, in the sense that if a priest does not want to marry a gay couple, okay. Like, I mean, you sort of go like, if you're a gay couple, find a priest who wants to, don't you want to be married by a priest who wants to marry you? Like, I mean, there can be priests who don't like you as a person. In another sense, it's not like a discrimination sense, but they don't want to marry you because they just don't like you. So that I just, people can have a little, they're a little bit afraid.
It was the same thing, Sal. It's the same thing, and here's why. It's because it's about fundamentally, this is about conceptual frameworks. So, your argument is like, you can't make me say, or you can't make me think that that a man is a woman. You can't do that. I'm not going to do it. The end. You can't force me to allow that person into this space. It's exactly the same thing, because and it was done really surreptitiously with the best intentions with the gay marriage thing, because if someone had to come to us and you said there was a debate, but there kind of wasn't. It was like, all of a sudden, boom, this thing just happened. It's like, what the I mean, I didn't see it brewing. I didn't see it brew in the background. I didn't see it. I'm a busy person. So it was all of a sudden, yes, these people coming and saying, a bloke and a bloke in civil union, which again, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, no problem. I was going to gay DVs in the early 90s. It's like, and I always thought, and I suppose this would be the best way of articulating it, I always thought, even back then, that it's like, well, this is a real situation. These are real relationships. They need to be recognized. The dynamics that apply in that kind of thing apply there. And like because I actually, and this is back in the mid 90s, we went to a couple of jobs where families were falling apart over wills because the property wasn't going to the partner because it wasn't recognized. And I remember thinking, man, that's just wrong. Like, you know, you should be able to do that. But that's recognizing a relationship. That's not redefining a term. So when you come to people like me and say, you will say that this and this is the same as that, I'm like, no. And then you come along and say, and by the way, you will let them in your sacred spaces. And more than that, you will, force of law, you will bless this, you will recognize this, and you will give it the same sacredness and everything else as that. And my answer is no.
Oh,
So
okay,
that's why I see it's the same. Like that was a wedge.
I don't think it's the same. I think
want to
that
throw in something else.
There are enough similarities that there's enough overlap. I don't think it's exactly.
I would say this. So I think that if a religious person, so it's Christian, Jewish, Islam, Hindu, whichever religion you are, that isn't that in their doctrine of marriage does not want to marry a same-sex couple, I think that they should have the freedom not to do that. However, I will say that one of the ways that it's not the same as men coming into female spaces is because the union is between two people. So in 2001, 2003, it was the case where a trans man was able to marry a woman. So this is a female marriage, and it was the federal high court allowed it to happen. And basically, I've read this case, and
I knew them.
Oh, did you? Oh, there you go.
Government fought. They were basically in the same position that you were, fighting to keep that marriage legal.
Yes. So what got it over the line is that the court ruled that the people involved, for all people that involved, it was a opposite sex marriage, that they viewed it as that. So that it was a legal fiction that was created for that reason. So but one of the issues is that sort of has spilled over, and let's not lose sight of the fact that happened before 15 years before gay marriage became legal. So which I actually think is a huge controversy. Like, trans people actually got the right to marry
before gay people in this country, yeah.
Before gay people did.
Yeah.
Such a forgotten more than a decade before. Almost like we're like 15, 16 years beforehand. Like a decent amount of time, almost a generation. But when you're like, you can't compare a marriage to a female space and say, because I think about it in the terms of my situation at the moment, is that I, as the founder and CEO of a female space, I cannot consent for all of those women that they all see a man as a woman. And that's what a law would be demanding that I do. And I can't do that. In a marriage, when you're talking about two people, you can kind of make that concession to a point. Although I think that the way they did it was wrong. What they should have done in 2001 or 2, or 3, whenever it happened, they should have just actually said gay marriage is legal, like same-sex marriage is legal. Like, they just did it wrong.
It would have, you're right, but like I got a very different take than that. If they just had, again, because it comes down to conceptual frameworks and the definitions of words, if they had just said, we're going to recognize this union and not use the word marriage, it wouldn't have been an issue. I promise that, you know, reactionary Catholics like me, and I'm not, okay, like I'm not as religious as I want to be, Kev, or as you think I am. Like, I'm actually quite flattered that you think that, but
I don't know, you're up my ass quite a lot.
Dude, yeah, I know. I'm a dirtbag sinner, you know, and I kind of like.
Oh, good.
Okay, if they had just said civil union, that's it, no problem. I'd have gone, yeah, wouldn't have been an issue. Would not have been an issue. But to say no, it's a marriage, it's the same. It's like, no, it's not. That's a union between a man and a woman, because that's what a marriage is. And it's like, okay, Sal, you're right in so much as like definitions can kind of like evolve, but if they're not linked with reality, which is fundamentally what we're here to discuss, then there's a dissonance.
Yeah, but I think that that's my distinction. Is I think that the definition of marriage, because it's a completely man-made concept, the definition can evolve and adapt to reality, where then it just goes, oh, like same-sex couples want to get married, then they can. Whereas when you're talking about the definitions of men and women, no, those two words cannot adapt, because these are beyond reality, like beyond language terms, like these are beyond human terms. Like if we took out all language right now and we couldn't speak to each other anymore, we'd still know the difference between men and women. I mean,
But
if
we
you took
also
out,
know the difference.
language, marriage would be over, but men and women would still be different.
Yeah, no, marriage wouldn't be over because, like, again, it's a recognition of reality. It's like, okay, because like what's happened historically in reality is like men and women have got together. Monogamy is the least worst form of union. Like, are there other forms? Like, yes. Like, do you have harems on, from both sides? Do you have all these matriarchal harems? Do you have like, yes, do you have all these other things? The least were, but all of these things come down between a union between a man and a woman. All of them. Every single one of them. Like, they allow multiple ones and stuff like that, but we're still talking about the union of a man and woman. And that's a recognition of a biological reality. All we've done in linguistically is recognize something and categorized it and given it a name. We've named it. We haven't invented it.
I understand what you're saying, but it's the concept of marriage that is the man-made concept, not the man and woman being part of it part. It's the marriage part that's man-made.
I don't really understand.
Like, don't get me wrong. Obviously, only a man and a woman can create a baby. Like,
well,
we understand
I still
that.
don't understand what you mean when you're saying marriage. I think we're talking about different things, and this is an indication, incidentally, that the left and the postmodernists have done a great job, because we're
yeah. No, I mean, exactly. Like, what do we all even mean by marriage? But like, obviously, like in terms of monogamous couples, like continuing the human species. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be monogamous. I mean, only men and women procreating can continue the human species, because that's, I don't know, biological sex is inescapable. Australian Human Rights Commission. But like
it is funny though. Can I digress for 1 second? The fact that we're all discussing this, isn't it kind of funny? Like, I genuinely feel, no kidding, I kind of feel like the Joker. Like, part of me like is like, I'm scared and shocked that this is happening and there's a bunch of totalitarian weirdos, but oh my god, isn't it funny? Like, I kind of like,
no, you have to laugh at it all the time. And you also, like, it's just because look at us. Okay, so we're 3 people sitting here who basically we agree on 99% of stuff. We are arguing the 1% of stuff. I mean, like, it's like, who gives a shit? Like, we all just have different opinions of how some things works, and having different opinions is totally fine. It's when facts are the things that are changed. And so when you
it's when the authorities come and say, accept this.
Yes,
it's the use of authority. It's not just the facts. It's not just the facts. Like, I don't want to sound like Pontius Pilate here, but like, the postmodernists to a certain extent have a point, because their argument really was that of Pontius Pilate. So there's no such thing as truth. There is only facts in the service, facts that can be put together in a narrative in the service of power. Fundamentally, that was Pilate's argument. And like, yes, true. To a certain extent, to a certain extent, when you're exercising power, because you got to remember where Pilate was coming from. And again, I get this. Like, I totally get this. I know that's a pretentious thing to say, but I get this. I understand the use of corporal power. I fucking get it. So, like, where he was coming from, like, I sympathize deeply with Pontius Pilate. He's, second only to Judas. He's actually my favorite figure in the Gospels. Sorry, boss. God, I kind of like worship, but like, my actual favorite, the person that I kind of like, who I get, like, I get Pilate and I get Judas. I get it. Totally understand it, where they're coming from, but the exercise of power, and see, that's it, Sal. Like, so, like, yes, you can have your own truths. Like, we can actually, to a certain extent, politically live in a postmodernist world. In fact, we need to live in a postmodernist world politically, unless authority is going to be used to say this is true and this is not.